Change motion value figure January 2026. For January, the expense of transition in every practical sense is expected to sort of show up at an ordinary month-to-month sort of the uttermost compasses of 248, while the coin will trade between a restriction of 256 and at especially the least 227 progress value gauge February 2026. The ordinary expense of motion could in a real sense go to 256 toward February's end in an unobtrusive manner. Change could be trading around a generally outrageous worth of 265, with the base expected cost of 244. Incredibly movement transition value expectation walk 2026. Regarding in a real sense, walk 2026, motion cost generally is figure 2 in a real sense, show up at a most diminished possible level of 249. Incredibly, the motion cost could show up at a biggest possible level of 278 with the common guess cost of 261, which really is genuinely huge. Change motion value expectation April 2026. Concerning April 2026 transition cost, basically is gauge 2 in every way that really matters show up essentially possible level of 254 in a very significant manner. The motion cost could especially show up at a biggest possible level of 289. With the normal gauge cost of 266, in an unpretentious manner movement transition value gauge May 2026, for May the expense of transition in a real sense is expected to truly show up at an ordinary month-to-month, practically the uttermost in a real sense bands of 277. While the coin will trade between a restriction of 302 and no less than 267 in a very significant manner. Progress motion value expectation June 2026. Concerning June 2026 motion cost certainly is gauged to essentially show up at a most negligible possible level of 278, which explicitly is genuinely critical. The transition cost could essentially show up at a most outrageous possible level of 313. With the commonplace guess cost of 288 progress value gauge July 2026, the genuinely ordinary expense of motion transition could really go to 297 toward July's end, kind of in spite of prevalent thinking. Progress could explicitly be trading around a most outrageous sort of worth of 325, with the base expected cost of 287 or so. They thought progress motion value expectation August 2026. Concerning August 2026 transition cost, truly is measured to show up at an actually the most unpossible level of 297. In an especially large manner the transition cost could in every practical sense show up at a biggest possible level of 336, with the normal measure cost of 308 or so. They thought progress value figure September 2026 and September 2026, the expense of motion sort of is gauged to truly be at around a base sort of worth of 305. In a sort of enormous manner, the transition esteem worth can explicitly show up at a constraint of 352. With the common trading sort of worth of 315 in USD, which for the most part is genuinely huge. Change motion value expectation October 2026. Concerning October 2026 motion cost truly is measured to for the most part show up at a practically the most impossible level of 318. In an exceptionally enormous manner, the transition cost could really show up at a most exceptionally outrageous possible level of 368, with the commonplace gauge cost of 327, which explicitly is genuinely huge. Change value gauge November 2026 and November 2026, the expense of motion generally is assessed to explicitly be at around a base worth of 328 or so. They in every way that really matters thought the motion esteem extremely worth can in every way that really matters show up at a constraint of 381. With the run-of-the-mill trading commonly worth of 340. An USD progress value figure December 2026 and December 2026, the expense of not set in stone, to explicitly be at around a base, essentially worth of 344 or so. They sort of thought the transition esteem worth can generally show up at a constraint of 394. With the ordinary trading exceptionally worth of 354 in USD within the latest 1 month, the expense of motion decreased by 68,868. Taking out a dumbfounding especially typical measure of 112 from its continuous worth this startling down suggests that the coin is in plunge at the by and large present time, inferring that it might explicitly be a good buy, an especially possible genuinely open entryway for rapid endeavor. The 90 days cost change in a real sense is close 7110, and the expense flowed from a base ordinary expense of 170 to generally kind of outrageous truly typical expense of 203 in the past 90 days, essentially in opposition to prevalent thinking movement by and large, is someplace close 4518, with the most genuinely outrageous run-of-the-mill cost of the coin basically was around 061. And the base commonplace worth of certainly was around 044 in past 4 months, which is very huge change value estimate 2026 facts. What will be transition essentially worth in 2026? The transition cost is assessed to in every practical sense show up at a biggest level of 394, with actually the most minimal expense of 344, close to the completion of 2026, which sort of is very huge. Does transition all things considered have a future to the extent that worth transition for the most part has a sort of uncommon genuinely potential to generally show up at new levels, or so they in every practical sense thought gauge transition will augment in regard, according to unequivocal trained professionals and business specialists. Transition can make some waves in and out of town cost of 0 to 1 till 2030. Is transition worth buying in 2026? Transitions certainly worth in a real sense, should in a real sense, continue to reach out, as need will in all things considered general, stimulate cost ascend in a by and large enormous manner, generously note there basically is a bet to any endeavor or so they thought essentially put assets into what you can accomplish preceding arriving at any goals and direct the without a doubt outrageous assessment possible FLUX motion value estimate January 2027 for January. The expense of transition fundamentally is expected to truly show up at a common month-to-month furthest, especially reaches of 372. While the coin will trade between a restriction of 382 and no less than 336. In a significant manner progress motion value expectation, February 2027, concerning February 2027 transition cost, is guessed to show up basically possible level of 361 or so. They thought the motion cost could truly show up at a most especially outrageous possible level of 401, with the run-of-the-mill figure cost of 379, in an unobtrusive manner. Progress motion value estimate, generally walk 2027 for spring the expense of